Hello, this is the voice of Dr. Rosa Miles, and my Nlaka'pamux name is Maj, and I would like to share right now the Administrative Memorandum of Agreement between the City of Seattle, City Light Department, and the Nlaka'pamux Nation, providing for administrative details in the implementation of the Traditional Cultural Properties study portion of the Skagit River Project Settlement Agreement concerning traditional cultural properties. The Administrative Memorandum of Agreement, MOA, is made and entered into by and between the City of Seattle, by and through its City Light Department, the City, and the Nlaka'pamux Nation. The Nation, the City, and the Nation are hereinafter referred to jointly in this agreement as the parties. Sorry about the shadow. It's getting late at night, so the lights are causing this cell phone shadow, but hopefully you can read it okay. Recitals. Whereas the city owns and operates the Skagit River Hydroelectric Project, FERC number 553, the Skagit Project or the project pursuant to a license issued by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, on May 16, 1995. Page 2. Whereas the nation is an Aboriginal tribe whose traditional territory includes portions of the Skagit River Project and who are concerned and directly impacted by the effects of the project on the properties of traditional cultural importance. Sorry, that was my dog outside. Whereas the city and the nation are parties of the Skagit River Hydroelectrical Project, for number 553, the Traditional Cultural Properties Settlement Agreement, the TCP agreement, which was executed and submitted to FERC on July 1993, and which is incorporated into the new license. And whereas, pursuant to the TCP agreements, the city shall fund the completion by the nation of an inventory of traditional cultural properties in the project area in the United States, including a complete analysis under the National Historic Preservation Act and the potential mitigation measures in and near the Skagit project area. And whereas pursuant to 36 CFR Part 800 regulations implementing Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act, the city and the nation are among the parties to one of the two Skagit Project Cultural Resources Memorandum of Agreement, the Cultural Resource MOAs, executed in February 1994 and incorporated into the Skagit River License. And whereas the TCP agreement contemplates a Memorandum of Agreement, MOA, that defines the scope of work and implements the administrative details of the TCP agreement. Now, therefore, the parties agree as follows. Agreement. Section 1, project description. The nation shall work with the city to conduct a TCP study of the Skagit project area. The TCP study shall be undertaken pursuant to the scope of work outlined in Exhibit A of this MOA. The TCP study is intended to inventory, evaluate, and determine the effect of the Skagit project operations on the traditional cultural properties in the project area located within the United States. The study will also develop mitigation measures in and near the project area, including an analysis of the costs, if any. Section 2, funding and coordination. A, funding the TCP agreement requires the city to fund cultural activities and inventory of the nation's traditional cultural properties of the Skagit project area located within the United States. The amounts specific in the TCP agreement constitute the city's entire monetary obligation to the nation for mitigation of project impacts to traditional cultural properties. TCP agreement section 2.11. All funding amounts are defined as 1990 United States dollars, TCP agreement section 2.5.1. Payment for the TCP $100,000 covered by this MOA will be made to the nation in response to the study invoices and progress reports for work completed that the nation submits to the city. Payment of the amount due will be made within 30 days of the city receiving each invoice. B, Inflation adjustment. Payments as part of this MOA shall be adjusted for inflation as provided by Section 2.5.1 of the TCP agreement. This will be accomplished as follows. Payment to the nation will be adjusted based on actual inflation. Adjustment shall be made using the revised Consumer Price Index, CPI-U, for all urban consumers as published by the United States Department of Labor for the Seattle metropolitan area. The indices used shall be those published for the last half of 1990 and for subsequent years, the last half of the calendar year preceding that in which a payment or expenditures is to be made. This index for the last half of a given year is published in February of the following year. Thus, the city will use the 1990 index and the indices for the years preceding the year of the payments for actual inflation through the preceding year. In addition, by the end of the first quarter of the year following the year of the payments, the city will provide the nation with a make-whole payment to cover inflation during the year payment was due. The city will use the index for the second half of the year of the previous year to calculate the amount of the whole make-whole payment. Exhibit B, inflation calculation, provides an example of the method used to calculate inflation adjustments. C, coordination. Pursuant to Section 3 of the MOA, the nation agrees to keep the city fully informed of the project status and the expenditures of the city funds until the TCP study has been completed and city funds expended. These documentation and reporting requirements are described in more detail in Exhibit A, Section 3D. The nation shall make every effort to meet the approximately 18-month TCP study schedule outlined in the scope of work, Exhibit A, Section 4E. However, the parties acknowledge that despite best efforts, delays might occur due to circumstances such as, but not limited to, either unavailability or adverse weather. Any rescheduling, extension, or other modification of the TCP study or other work covered by this agreement must be written agreement between the parties. The city and the nation shall each assign an authorized representative who will provide liaison services and work cooperatively with the other party to ensure timely and satisfactory completion of the work. Section 3, documentation and reporting requirements. Documentation and reporting requirements of the TCP study are outlined in the scope of work. Presented as Exhibit A of the MOA, the nation shall also submit brief quarterly progress reports to the city as described in Exhibit A, Section 4F, and Exhibit C. Upon completion of the TCP study, the nation shall furnish to the city a final written TCP study report, as well as a summary memorandum documenting the task completed and expenditure of funds. The completion memorandum and related materials will be used by the city to document its compliance with FERC license requirements. Section 4, relationship to the TCP agreements. This MOA has been executed pursuant to and is to be used in conjunction with the TCP agreements. To the event of any inconsistency between the provisions of such agreements and this MOA, the provisions of the TCP agreement shall prevail. Section 5, term of the memorandum of agreement. The MOA shall become effective upon the signing of this agreement and shall remain in effect for the term of the existing FERC license, which includes the terms of any annual licenses that may be issued after the existing license has expired. Schedule 4, notices and deliverable materials. All notices and other material to be delivered shall be in writing and shall be delivered or mailed to the following individuals and addresses. So, if to the city, Director of Environmental Affairs Division, if to the nation, Bob Pasco, tribal chairperson. And the address for Seattle City Light, and the address for Nlaka'pamux Nation. Amendments. No modification or amendment of the provisions of the MOA shall be effective unless in writing and signed by an authorized representative of the city and by authorized representation of the nation. The parties expressly reserve the right to modify this MOA from time to time by mutual agreement. Execution of counterparts. The MOA may be executed simultaneously in several counterparts, each of which shall be in the original and all of which shall constitute but one instrument. In witness whereof the parties hereto have set their hands as of the day and year hereinafter written. And then we have the signature here of Bob Pasco, and he's signing for all the Nlaka'pamux Nations for 15. However, he's actually with NNTC, Nlaka'pamux Nation Tribal Council. So this was on March 3rd, 2010. And as we know, there's quite a few changes with the membership of NNTC. City of Seattle City Light Department was also signed, closed in 2010. Exhibit A, scope of work, City of Seattle Skagit Hydroelectric Project, the Nlaka'pamux Nation Traditional Cultural Properties Study. The study will be undertaken pursuant to the National Historic Preservation Act, NHPA, Archaeological Resources Protection Act, American Indian Religious Freedom Act, and the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. The study will implement stipulations 2 and 3 of the United States Parties Cultural Resources Memorandum of Agreement, executed in February 1994. The study will use the guidelines of the National Register Bulletin number 38, Guidelines for Evaluation. And documenting traditional cultural properties, TCP, Exhibit A1, and other procedures as appropriate to specific sites and tribal values. Purpose of the study. The purpose of the TCP study is to comply with above stated laws to meet the terms of the TCP agreement and to implement the February 1994 Cultural Resources MOA pursuant to the project's FERC license issued May 16, 1995. In addition to providing an inventory of the traditional cultural properties in that project vicinity, the study shall determine project impacts, analyze potential mitigation measures, including costs, if any. Goals of the study. Goals of the TCP study include identify the range of types of TCPs and the geographic locations within the Skagit project area within the United States. Evaluate the identified TCPs with the Skagit River area within the United States against National Register of Historic Places criteria and views of the nation regarding integrity and significance. C, determine the effect of continuing Skagit project operations in identified traditional and cultural properties within the United States, and develop measures to mitigate unavoidable adverse impacts to TCPs, impacts, must be a typo, 10, TCPs within the Skagit project area within the United States. Traditional cultural property study. Goals of the TCP study will be met through an integrated program of archival review, informant interviews, field visits with tribal elders or other informants, and preparation of a final report. Appropriate for public dissemination with an appendix containing confidential information. The study will be conducted under the direct supervision and control of the nation, which shall be directly responsible for the hiring of consultants and staff. The nation shall serve as the study's prime contractor. The nation shall use the inventory of Native American religious use practices, localities, and resources, Mount Baker, Nlaka'pamux National Forest, 1981, as a model for the study. The parties will consult with the National Park Service in the further development of the scope of work, TCP agreement, section 3.2.1, and where federal lands are involved, coordinate site visits and mitigation planning and the appropriate federal land managers. Because the city, along with the NPS, is legally responsible for compliance with federal historic preservation laws as a condition of the scheduled project's new FERC license, the parties shall work together to select the principal investigator. The study should include the following components: inventory, archival review. An archival and literature review will be undertaken by the nation to identify the types and geographic locations of traditional cultural properties expected to occur within the project area in the United States. The nation will consult with the city and seek its advice during this review process upon its completion. The nation will furnish the city with a preliminary inventory of traditional cultural properties. Information interviews. The principal investigator shall conduct interviews with nation elders or other members familiar with the project area. If the principal investigator is not a member of the nation, then the nation shall designate an authorized representative to work with the principal investigator to conduct or coordinate interviews directed towards the identification of cultural geographic locations in the Skagit project area and toward determining the significance of the TCP from the viewpoint of members of the nation. Prior to conducting such interviews to the nation and or nation's contractors will consult with and seek the advice of the city concerning potential interview questions. The interviews may be taped and transcribed so long as the consent of the first obtained from the nation's council. The tapes and transcriptions will remain the property of the nation. Interesting. Field visits. Field visits will be undertaken to clarify geographic locations, to complete questionnaires, to take photographs, and map the TCPs if access to these places is considered appropriate by nation elders. Field visits will be coordinated with the NPS and the city. Dialogues between the interviews and tribal informants may be taped and transcribed so long as consent is first obtained from the nation's council. Evaluation. TCPs will be evaluated based upon their eligibility to the National Register of Historic Places and or their significance to the nation. The nation's definitions of integrity and significance will be determined through discussion with elders, members, and tribal councils, and incorporate with NRHP criteria. The nation will consult with the city and seek its advice during the evaluation process. Upon its completion, the nation will furnish the city with a list of traditional cultural properties eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. Mitigation. The nation will develop the list of any TCPs eligible for the National Register of Historic Places that are adversely affected by the project. Mitigation measures will be developed for such TCPs. The list of properties and suggested mitigation measures for those properties will be furnished to the city upon completion. The nation will consult with the city and seek its advice during the development of the properties list and the suggested mitigation measures. The NPS will be consulted during the development of mitigation measures, except mitigation measures on non-federal land. It's getting thinner, we're almost there. Report preparation. Report format. 2 reports will be prepared. One will be suitable for public dissemination to researchers, agencies, and libraries, and the second report will be confidential, available only to the nation, the city, the National Park Service, and the FERC. The first will present the results of the study in general manner with no precise site locations. The second confidential report will consist of the general document with appendices, which will document exact locations and other information. The nation may consider confidential to the extent necessary to document eligible properties, provided that no documentation shall occur which interferes with rather than protects the use and status of traditional and cultural properties. The nation will consult with the city and seek its advice during the development of the subject reports. The final report will be submitted to the city in draft form for review. Draft form is a complete manuscript that would require only minor editorial changes. The city will review and provide comments in 30 days as the schedule states. The nation shall provide the city written notification of changes they believe should not be incorporated into the report. Within 30 days after receiving the city's comments, the nation or its consultants will complete 2 sets of final reports, a confidential report and a report suitable for public dissemination. I wonder where that report is. 3 copies of the confidential report will be produced by the nation. These 3 copies of the final confidential report will be provided to the city, which will submit 1 copy each to the FERC and to the National Park Service, provided that the confidential contents of the reports or other confidential information will only be disclosed on a strict need-to-know basis, and reports will be prepared and edited accordingly. The confidential report will contain, where appropriate, the questionnaires, maps of geographic locations of eligible traditional and cultural properties, and National Register of Historic Places forms for NRHP eligible properties, and other supporting material the nation feels is too sensitive for the public, but is necessary to support the eligibility of properties for which listing is sought. The nation will produce 4 copies of the second report, which shall be suitable for public dissemination, for example, libraries. The copies of the report will be provided to the city. The @ION will provide an additional copy of the report and copies of the, I think it should probably be nation, the @ION, and copies of the National Register of Historic Places Properties forms to the city for submittal to the Washington State Office of Archaeology and Historic Preservation. Report content. To the extent, in the opinion of the nation, it is consistent with full protection of confidential information, the report shall include, but not be limited to, A, abstract. The abstract will state the most significant findings of the study and will be a synopsis of the work performed and the results of the study. Methodology, a description of assumption methods and techniques utilized in the study. A description of any constraints or obstacles in achieving the goals of the study, and if there were any problems encountered. Results, an inventory and evaluation of the archival interview data, site visits, narratives, consultation write-ups, and comments on the accomplishments of the study in light of previous knowledge, evaluation of the TCPs against National Register of Historic Places and Tribal Significance, criteria and mitigation measures for NRHP properties, a bibliography listing of all pertinent literature and documents examined using the American Antiquity Style Guide format, a table of traditional cultural properties and their eligibility to the National Register of Historic Places, a list of individuals in an organization contact including as an appendix, consultation, confirmation, or written record of all meetings with elders and site visits with elders or other informants. This record will include, but not be limited to, place and date, persons consulted, summary of topics discussed, and conclusions reached based on the meeting. Report appendices confidential. Each interview will be written up and completed questionnaires attached as an appendix. The interviews and completed questionnaires will remain confidential unless, in the opinion of the nation, such action will not jeopardize the full protection of the confidential information. These documents will only be provided to the nation, the city, the National Park Service, and the FERC as part of the final confidential report. Confidential contents reports or other confidential information will only be disclosed on a strict need-to-know basis, and reports will be prepared and edited accordingly. This confidential information need only be provided to the extent necessary to support the listing of eligible properties in the National Register of Historic Places, and only when such listing is sought by the nation. Administrative conditions, principal investigator. Working in coordination with the nation, the principal investigator for the TCP study shall be responsible for conducting and coordinating the study and will directly supervise the project to ensure timely completion, adherence to the statement of work, and maintenance of quality. The principal investigator shall be professional, qualified, and ethnologist or other suitable researcher familiar with National Register Bulletin 38 guidelines for evaluating and documenting traditional cultural properties. Exhibit A1, and with Indigenous people in the Pacific Northwest. The parties shall work together to select the principal investigator. The nation's authorized representative. The nation shall designate authorized representatives to work with the principal investigator to conduct or to coordinate informant interviews. Preference shall be given to qualified members of the nation, respected by the tribal informants, and with some prior experience, training, or interest in cultural heritage and oral history programs. The nation's representatives will work through the nation to keep the city representative apprised of any delays or difficulties which may delay completion of any of the tasks by the established dates. City representative, the city will assign an authorized representative who will provide all liaison services and forward necessary documents to the nation. The city's representative will seek timely progress and completion of the work. City review. Prior to the beginning of the TCP study, the nation shall provide the city a breakdown of planned tasks and cost per task, the name of the designated principal investigator for the project, the name of the designated nation representative, a list of names and credentials of the interviewers proposed, and list of any nation members who will staff the project and their roles. Informant fees and expenses will be paid to all native informants. The nation will consult with the city to ensure that contracts comply with applicable city, state, and federal contract and cultural resources protection laws, the schedule. So there's 150 days here, the schedule. The planned duration of the TCP study is approximately 18 months with significant projects, events, schedules as set forth below. Tasks deliverable to Seattle City Lights from nation to city, consistent with full protection of confidential information on a need-to-know basis unless otherwise noted. 1. Begin contract no later than October 1st, 1996. Furnish lists of references and repositories to be accessed for archival. Furnish inventory properties based on the completion of archival review. Furnish state questionnaire comments due from the city. And that's the last page of the document that was provided except for the financials. So it's interesting, in the financial spreadsheet that was with this, there was actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 tabs in the file. In the file, there was a Nlaka'pamux cultural activity support. So the total settlement amount was $600,000. Hang on, there we go. And then there's an amount there for $500,000 for cultural activity support. And then TCP inventory was $100,000. And then there was other listed cumulative expenditures through 2020 was $489,281. And the second amount is $95,829. And so I'm not certain financially what occurred. Just these totals alone together, with the 600, 500, 100, and these two amounts comes to $1,785,000. I'm not too sure. In our research online, we weren't able to find a report for the people who were calling it the Seattle City Lights, or it's called the City of Seattle City Light Department. The challenge is with these agreements is accessibility to reporting, financial accounting, and really just letting us know what's happening with the project. So some of the elders had brought up the City of Seattle City Light Department project, and here it is. However, there's a lot of unknown information.